house was built in 1847 by Nathaniel Scott, and the Scott family was sort of part of this wave of settlers that came over from Georgia, and Nathaniel Scott was the half-brother of Judge John Harper, who was sort of credited as founding the town of Auburn. So it's a group of Methodists that came over from Georgia that settled here.
The migration to Auburn seems to be a lot of family groupings. So he's related to Judge Harper, and I think there's some other relatives in that mix.
The Scott family was more of a prominent family in Auburn. You know, not that Auburn was really a big city at the time, but they were planters, farmers.
Yeah, he purchased the property in 1846, and so guessing that he probably built it soon after purchasing the property. There's no indication that there was a house here prior to that.
The center was named in, I guess it was 2006, 2007, after Caroline Marshall John, and she was Dr. Ralph John's wife, who Ralph John's president here for a while, and a historian, and so she had a real love of history and a real love of Auburn, so it's very appropriate that we're named after her.
This building is in transition right now. Right now it's the offices for the Caroline Marshall John Center for the Arts and Humanities, and so the staff work out of these offices, and so it's not used for public programming right now. But it has been in the past, and in the future it will be. We're undergoing a renovation and addition to this campus, this part of campus, starting in February.
The house itself has gone through a lot of transformations in its history. You know, like the back porch was added on at one point, part of the attic had burned, the dormers, so that was changed like in the 30s or 40s, so it's not quite like it was in 1847, but we actually had a guy come who's a paint analyst who does this work on historic buildings, and so he took samples of all the walls and ceilings and mantles and all the wood, and he could tell what was original, sort of what was here in 1847, what was added later on, what were the original paint colors. You know, I think there was wallpaper in a couple of rooms, so it definitely has a layered history.
It's one of the oldest houses still standing in Auburn, and so in a sense it's a local treasure, but we want it to be sort of a classroom, inside and outside. We want the yard and the gardens and all of the structures and trees to be points of interpretation for anyone who visits.
I conducted research on the history of Pebble Hill and worked with them to start developing some ways to interpret the building to the community, to get its history out there.
We want the house to be used for functions, of course, so departmental parties, departmental meetings, those kinds of things. But more importantly, we want it to be able to interpret the 1840s to the public. And so it'll be filled with art and with furnishings that are from that period. And this will allow us to begin conversations on what it was like to live in Alabama in the 1840s, whether you were a displaced Native American that gave up this land so that this home could be built, or whether you were slaves who helped build the house and other structures in Auburn.
Really, as sort of Auburn grows, and we've lost a lot of older homes in Auburn, either to development or anything like that. And so it's sort of nice to have this piece of Auburn history. It's something that was built when Auburn was first established, really. And if you sort of look at the history of the house and the changing landscape around it, you really get a sense of the history of Auburn.
In order for us to think about the future, we always have to think about the past. We always have to learn from the past. And there's a sense of dignity that comes to a community when it preserves its past. There's something about knowing that a community cares about its structures and cares about its land and the landscapes in order to preserve that for a future generation. And so in a sense we're looking forward to future generations being able to enjoy all of what this house has to offer, but it's also about the past, really honoring those who come before us, all of the people who have cared for this home, really really bringing it full circle and doing justice to one of these historical treasures.